this is CricketSong with Inner Wisdom, and this video is going to be answering the question, what is the difference between paganism and New Age thought, and is Neo-Paganism a mixture of the two? So I had a viewer subscriber submit this question to me, and they wanted me to discuss my definitions and my understanding of paganism, New Age thought, and Neo-Paganism. They were presenting me with the idea that Neo-Paganism is a mixture of paganism and New Age thought. So I want to give you they were looking for my input, so here's the video giving you my input. So first of all, you know me, I like to start with definitions of words. So I'm going to give you my definitions of these words and then discuss my understanding of how they relate to each other, if they relate to each other at all. So I have some notes. So I jotted down a definition for the word, so I'm going to read you what I've written. Okay? So paganism. So paganism is a term used to describe a wide variety of traditions and spiritual practices or paths. And all of them have an emphasis on the reverence of nature, and they are usually polytheistic, which means many gods, and or animistic, which means that everything has a soul of its own. And so paganism usually incorporates people who have these viewpoints, and maybe you are someone who is polytheistic and animistic, which I tend to feel that's sort of where I play. I believe there are many gods, but I also believe that everything in existence is part of the one source. So everything has a distinct soul of its own, but in the end we're all connected by this all. Now that's paganism for me. So if you have a spiritual practice that really has a reverence for nature, and you either are polyistic or animistic or any of the istic or isms that kind of incorporate that, and I would say that that spiritual practice that you are practicing is pagan. Now, New Age thought. Let me read you what I jotted down for the idea of a New Age thought. So, New Age thought is a term used to describe a holistic approach to life and the universe. Here, there is a belief that divinity imbues everything with an emphasis on the sovereignty of self. New Agers believe in the existence of semi-divine beings such as angels, ascended masters, and other spiritual entities who can be channeled in order to gain spiritual wisdom and understanding. New Age thought has a focus on healing through alternative medicine in order to bring balance to the body, mind, and spirit. So here there is more, the people who are engaged in New Age thought or that sort of system may have reverence for nature, but that's not their primary focus. They're mostly focused on personal growth, personal enlightenment. They believe that there is this divinity within everything, so they have that sort of belief in a divine, but it's not really personified into specific gods, though it can be. But that isn't necessarily the focus of New Age thought. Generally, you'll find people who follow a New Age thought process or a New Age type spirituality focus more on the divine within oneself, and they're looking to raise their personal vibrational frequency to join the higher frequencies of the divine. Here I see a difference between paganism is more connected to the earth, where New Age thought is looking to commune with higher vibrations like spirit. So that's how I sort of look at the two. It's almost like the difference between folk magic and ceremonial magic. It's sort of like that comparison. Everyone's looking for this spiritual growth, but they're coming at it from a different perspective, okay? Now, Neo-Paganism, from my understanding of what Neo-Paganism is, it's really just a term used to describe modern paganism. And the reason why we call it Neo-Paganism is because it's a new version of an old practice. So if you're like reconstructing a specific religious practice, you may be considered a reconstructionist, but you also may be considered neo-pagan if it is one of these pagan type religions, meaning you have a focus on the reverence of nature and everything that I discussed within paganism. So a lot of individuals would consider Wicca a neo-pagan spiritual path, because there is this newness to it. Even though Wicca may be pulling from older traditions and practices, set in, old folk magic that maybe your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother practiced, but because you're living in a modern age, you may be incorporating more modern concepts and even maybe more modern practices, because you have things that are available to you now that your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother did not, because of the actual time that she lived and the time that you lived. So my understanding is that neo-paganism is just this term to describe the paganistic practices that are done today in the modern time. So I don't necessarily feel that neo-paganism is a mixture of New Age beliefs and pagan beliefs, pagan practices, but it could be, because some of the New Age practices and beliefs and thoughts are based in a more modern understanding. It's almost like New Age tries to take some scientific information and scientific facts, theories and facts that have been, proven, and blending it with spirituality, like the metaphysical practices or metaphysical shops, understanding the scientific facts about crystals and then applying it to healing the body. That's a New Age thought. Now, a neo-pagan individual, someone who practices neo-paganism, may take crystals, which is found in New Age thought and practices, and blend it with their pagan foundation, where they're worshiping and working with Mother Nature or Gaia, Mother Earth, and doing magic, but also blending in some New Age thought. So they maybe start using crystals within their healing modalities. Maybe that could be considered neo-paganism, pulling the New Age thought and the paganistic practices to create this neo-paganism. But I also think sometimes, even if me, a Wiccan, who doesn't necessarily use crystals in her healings, but may still practice witchcraft, but maybe doing it with New Age practices. Maybe I use technology in my practice somehow.Maybe I do things with a more modern perspective. I would be considered neo-pagan, and I may be practicing what others may view as neo-paganism. Now, I am definitely someone who values labels. I definitely am. I understand that labels, names, hold this power. So I tend not to use terms like neo-paganism or neo-Wicca. I tend to use more words like non-traditional or more eclectic than throwing that neo on the front of it, because I feel like if you're in a modern day, you're living now and you're practicing even an old religion now, because it's in the now, it's still neo. So there's just an assumption that we cannot practice exactly the way that our great ancestors did, because we live in a different time. We have different influences on us that they did not. So everything old is new again, kind of thought. So that's my feeling. So I would say that the difference between paganism and New Age thought is the difference between connecting with the physical earth and looking for communion in the mental and spiritual realms. I feel like that's the two difference. differences. And Neo-Paganism, I can be a mixture of both of these, but I don't necessarily feel that it is exclusively a mixture of these two. So hopefully I answered the question. And if you are the viewer subscriber who asked me this question and I didn't answer it to your satisfaction, please leave a comment or send me another message and I'll see if I can clarify anything. Otherwise, thank you all for subscribing, and thank you to my patrons who are supporting me through Patreon for your unending and undying support. I love you. Mwah.